Welcome, and thanks for tuning in to An Acquired Chef's YouTube channel. Go ahead and hit that subscribe button so you can stay tuned for more culinary innovations coming your way. Here we go. So again, basin flour or chickpea flour. So it's really got a nice nutty sort of background flavor to it, which is why it's great for, it's great to use with a lot of different things, but it's particularly great for pakora. So that we have here, I've got 150 grams worth of it. And then here I've got rice flour. That's about, so the rice flour is really there to give it that crispy, crunchy feel, better than plain flour. You could also use, other types of flour like tapioca flour and stuff, but you want that crunch, or even corn flour if you like. And so that's going to go in. So that's 150 grams of the basin, and that's 75 grams of the rice flour. So that's just going to go right on top. And I'm going to set him aside. And then I've also got 3 teaspoons of baking powder. Now you could use baking soda, you just need to quarter it. So that would be about 2/3 of a teaspoon, I believe, if I'm doing my math right. But basically 1 teaspoon of, sorry, 3/4 of a teaspoon of baking soda. So 1 teaspoon of baking powder is to 1/4 of a teaspoon of baking soda. So I've got 3, so you can do 3/4 baking soda instead if you have that or prefer that. I like baking powder because it's just not as strong as baking soda. So we have that. Now that's going to get mixed up in a bowl, and I'm just going to set him aside. Now the other things I've got here, as well as you can see, I'm going to walk through them in a second. I'm also going to put into this flour batter mix, if you like, and then we're going to set him aside and come back to him a bit later on. So I'm just mixing that in to make sure that baking powder is sort of getting all the way in there. I'm going to talk through these first, and then we're going to throw that in there as well. So first up, I've got, hopefully you can see these. This here is Carom Seeds or ajwain seeds. So it's really helpful when cooking with chickpea flour, just because it helps with digestion, particularly with fried foods, and then also particularly with chickpea flour. So that's just why I have that in there. It's got like when you bite into it, it's numbing sensation in the mouth. So you don't want too much, but we're making quite a bit of pakora today. So that's about, I believe it's 1.5 teaspoons of carom seed. Then we've got garam masala. So I've just got my standard stock garam masala. I've got 3 teaspoons of that to go into the batter. Then I've got, now this one's a tricky one. This here is dry pomegranate powder. You could always substitute it. So I've got 1.5 teaspoons of that as well. You can always substitute it with amchur or mango powder, again, another Indian ingredient. If you don't have that, that's okay too. You can always just throw some lime juice in. So about 1.5 teaspoons. So we're talking about probably 2 teaspoons of fresh lime or lemon juice that you add later on. So you wouldn't add it in here, you'd add it into the wet mix, which we'll talk through in a second. Kashmiri chili powder. So that's again another 1.5 teaspoons. That doesn't have a lot of heat to it. It does have it's not spicy at all. It's a little bit spicy, but it's not as spicy as like cayenne pepper or anything like that. So just a little bit of that. Optional, of course. If you don't want it, just omit it in case you don't like spice in your food. And finally, turmeric powder. So that's again 1.5 teaspoons of that. Now in the middle here, you'll see this little green leaves. This is fenugreek leaves or mehepi. Now you may not necessarily have fenugreek leaves, but if you can get your hands on fenugreek powder, you could throw a pinch of that in, like a pinch at the most. Like you wouldn't want more than that because it is quite bitter, and we do want that bitterness, but we don't want it to overtake the dish. So a pinch would be plenty. But if you have the leaves are nice because it also gives a nice texture and green color to the batter as well. So all of that's going to go in here. I'm just going to topple him in. And then I'm going to pause to see if there were any questions on any of what I've just gone through, because that's all the dry stuff. All right, so we're going to move on to the wet stuff. So that's aside. We'll come back to it and throw it on top of the wet ingredients in a second. I'm going to pop him away as well. And then we're going to go through the wet ingredients, lots of wet ingredients. It's going to make some space. So I'm going to be putting everything like right in front of you, and then I'm going to have my bowl propped up in the back just to keep me honest. I might actually go through the ingredients really quickly and then switch to the top camera so you can see me pop everything into the bowl. So we've got a lot of stuff going on over here. We're going to start with the shallots. hopefully that, yes, let me do that for a second. So here are the shallots. I have the salt sitting on top of it. That's 3 teaspoons of salt. So we're going to actually go in with the onions and the salt first. And I'm just going to put that in the bowl because we'll start with that, but I'll go through the rest of the ingredients. We also have half a tablespoon of garlic and half a tablespoon of ginger. So I've got a little bit more than that because I like that sort of gingery, garlicky flavor in the pakora, but half a tablespoon should cut it. If you don't want to go through the work of chopping, you can always buy the mint stuff from the grocery store, but I actually like to use pakora as a way to make a snack with things that are left over in the fridge. So it's a really good way to make a sustainable snack, because what I'll show you in a second is some of the spinach I have looks really like it's on its last legs. It looks really sad. And so the same goes for everything else that I'm using here. So I've had some garlic that I've salvaged. It was starting to, you know how sometimes garlic, if you keep it for too long, it starts to shoot up the green bits. So long as it's still got some juice in it and it's still fresh in that way, you can totally cut everything else around it and chop it up and use it rather than just throwing it or composting it. That way you still get some use out of it because you've spent money on it. So that's garlic and ginger that's going in. The next thing I've got here is, you can see the green chilies, and then I've got red chilies. So these are your standard red cayenne fresh chilies that you get in the grocers. The green chilies are Thai chilies or Indian chilies. The green chilies are actually especially spicy. So you can totally omit it all if you don't want to use any chili at all, or you can maybe just go with the cayenne, but I like the green sliced really thin. When you bite into the pakora, it gives a little bit of a chili bite, which is really nice. So I have one, so the green chili was itty bitty small. It was about that big, and then your cayenne peppers are the bigger ones. They're standard size. So chopped up even with the cayenne pepper to with the stalk at the top. I've actually even cut it further. So I've halved it, if you can see this. So just to make it into bite size, what we're looking for with pakoras as much as possible is to chop everything up to be as small as possible, so that when you throw the batter into the oil, it sticks to each other. Because if it's too big, then it starts to kind of take a weird shape. So then we've got mint leaves. So that's just a tablespoon's worth that I just chopped up roughly. That's going to give that nice freshness in the pakora, as would the coriander. So mint will be more sort of fresh and zingy, and coriander will be more sweet and sort of springy, if you like. It just always has that nice freshness. Now I know Kathy, not a big fan of coriander, totally exclude it if you don't like it. And that goes for all the ingredients here. And the ones that I've just talked through there are the base ingredients. So your sort of aromatics, your ginger, garlic, mint, coriander, and onions. And I've used shallots, just to be clear, red shallots, and it's better to use shallots, banana shallots, any of those sorts of French shallots if you have that, instead of onions, because onions again become quite oniony. We just kind of want that mellow flavor going on for those guys. Cool. So with that, so those were the aromatics and the sort of the base ingredients is what I like to call it, because you can't make pakora without that stuff. You definitely need that stuff. And then you've got the optional stuff. So here I've got potatoes. So I've just shredded this up with a grater. So and that starch is starting to come out, which is going to help the crunchiness as well. Now you'll see that there's quite a bit of liquid in there, so we'll talk about that a little bit later, because sorry, I should probably do it like that. So you can see there's a little bit of liquid in there. Now we're gonna have to adjust the water based on the amount of liquid that's in the vegetables. Otherwise, we basically want like a pancake consistency batter, nothing runnier than that. Maybe even thicker is better than pancake, because when you throw it into the hot oil, if it's too watery, it'll just spread everywhere. So if we have enough water in the vegetables that lends itself to the batter, then we reduce the amount of water that actually goes into the batter on top of it. So that's with the potatoes. So I've got potatoes today, and then I've got, like as I mentioned, some really, not the best looking spinach. It's still totally fresh. I've washed it. It's fine. But what the sort of the really good part about frying it means that you kind of almost kill all the germs that come with it. And I say germs, the term loosely, but basically it just works really well to, one, crispen up, because when you fry stuff, it just kind of gives it that sort of zing. And then also it gives you an opportunity to use vegetables that aren't maybe something you want to eat fresh. And so that way you kind of give them a second lease on life, if you like. Now, the third one here I have is eggplant. It's soaking in salt water because that's a trick with eggplant. I'm going to drain the water, of course, but basically once you've chopped eggplant and you don't want it to go brown immediately, you soak it in salt water until you're ready to use it. I'm sure most of you know that, but I just wanted to call out that it's got water in there that I'm just going to sieve out right now, actually, while we're talking. And that's just going to go straight back into the bowl and then into the batter in a second. So I've actually skinned the eggplant, sort of the purple skin. You don't have to, you can totally leave it on, but that's what I have there. So those are the three things. Now let's do it this way then. So I mentioned the onions, so they're just gonna go, or rather the shallots, they're just gonna go straight in. Now I'm gonna use a fork because, again, as I mentioned before, it's gonna help just break stuff up as you're sort of mixing the batter together, because you do want it in bite-sized forms. And I've roughly chopped this up, but it can always go a little bit smaller. And as I do that, I'm going to go in with the 3 teaspoons of salt and just kind of mix that in. And then I'm going to go in with the aromatics, and then over time I'll switch over to a spatula and mix everything else in as well. The other thing doing this with salt also pulls out some of the water from the actual vegetable first, so that it again starts to mix with the batter. That way it cooks better. So if you say, for example, didn't put as much salt in at the beginning, because that's what salt does, it pulls water out of stuff. So if you left it to the end, it's just your batter is gonna be really runny if you make it runny, but then also the vegetables will start to kick out water inside the frying pan, which is not ideal. We want that to happen outside so we can kind of reduce the amount of moisture and use that moisture as a basis for the batter instead, so it cooks better as well. So I just put the ginger and garlic in, and I'm going to actually switch over now to just the spatula. I'm going to go in next with the chilies. That's all of them as well. It's going in. And as I add things, I'm just going to try and mix it in as best I can, get that salt covering everything as we go. And you can already, I don't know if you can, maybe you can't see it, but the whole mix is starting. I'm putting more things in and it's not increasing in size because it's pulling the water out, and that's what we want. So that's gone in. Now I'm going to do the mint and the coriander together. And that's it for all the base ingredients. And then we'll start putting probably start with the potatoes next. So it's just got a really lovely color as well, green and red, and I suppose that's purple, maybe lavender. I've just got the oil starting to heat up on a very low heat, just because I don't want it to get too hot. I'll pump up the heat when we're getting closer to the batter being made. Now I've got a shallow pan, and I've got, kind of maybe an inch worth of oil. That's not the traditional way to make it. The traditional way to make it is to have like a big wok and to have it sort of, you almost want the pakoras swimming in the oil. That's how you make it traditionally. But I'm conscious of not wanting to use too much oil, just from a wastage perspective, but then also, trying to shallow fry it so that it, doesn't have too much oil all over it. So we'll come back to that in a second. We'll talk through that as we work through that. Now I'm going to go in with the potatoes next, just all of them in there. And you'll see here I've shredded it. So typically with pakoras, shredding is probably the most preferred way to prepare your vegetables. But I've got all 3 today. So I've got shredded potatoes, I've got chopped spinach, and then I've got cubed, very, very small cubed eggplant. You can use all of them, but the pakora shape usually is best when you shred. So whether you're using, like, you can even use broccoli florets, and you can cut it up, or cauliflower florets, cut it up into little like rice bites. That's perfect. You can pretty much, again, use anything in the fridge. You can use sweet potatoes instead of just regular potatoes. I even experimented with French beans or long beans the other day, cutting them up really, really small. You can use, I'm using spinach, but nothing to say that you can't. This is where it starts to move into Western vegetables, but silver beet and kale and all those other types of vegetables. Once you mix it in with the batter and the spice, it kind of all mostly tastes the same in terms of the vegetable. It's just more the texture that will vary because of the type of vegetable you put in. So that's all nicely mixed. So that's with the spinach gone in there. And now I'm just going to go in, just try and get most of the water out of the eggplant. And that's going to go in as well. so here we go. We've got a very sort of wet batter, which is cool. So that salt's really gone to town on the batter, and we are good to go now back to the dry batter that we mixed before. Yeah, so as you can see, I have gone in with the batter and I haven't even added any water yet. And I've gone in with half the batter and it's already sort of mixing in there without needing water. And so that's where I've put, I have a cup of water on standby, but I probably won't use all of it just based on the type of vegetables I've used today. Spinach is quite watery, potatoes cubed are not as watery as potatoes shredded. So even if you're using the same vegetable, depending on how you slice it up, could change how much water comes out of it. But yeah, so there you go. So I'm gonna just go ahead and throw the rest of the batter in. Now I've actually gone with probably closer to 1.5 ratio of batter to the vegetables. So I would typically just do 100 grams of chickpea or basin flour, 50 grams of rice flour, etc., 2 teaspoons of baking powder, 2 teaspoons of salt. And the reason, and you can adjust that batter along with the spices based on how how much batter you want. So if you just want enough batter to hold everything together, then what I just said would make sense. 100 grams of basin or chickpea flour, 50 grams of rice flour, 2 teaspoons of baking soda, and 2 teaspoons of salt, and then reduce some of the spices that I went through as well, drop it down all to 1 teaspoon. But I've gone up today because I just thought it'd be fun to see sort of pakora made the traditional way. Pakora made the traditional way has a lot of batter in it, but it shouldn't be runny batter, but it's got more batter than vegetable. And so that's where, with the second batch of flour that's gone in, you'll see that now it's gonna need water. And that's why I did it in 2 batches. So it gave it a chance to kind of do double absorption, if you like. So I'm gonna start with the water that I have in front of me. I'm gonna go in with 1/4 cup at a time. So I've got a total of 1 cup in there. And I'm just gonna kind of gradually add it in that way, because then I can control the amount that's gone in and not have it become too watery. Now, if you don't have pomegranate powder or mango powder and you decided to use lime juice, now would be the time to add it. So you want to make sure you don't add it at the end, because that's just going to make it very watery. So even if you were going to go ahead and use pomegranate syrup, for example, with that lime juice, now's the time to mix it in, because then you get the opportunity to make sure that you don't go, oops, I forgot the lime juice. Oh, now I got to add more flour to make it thicker, and just, you don't want that sort of a problem. So, because then if you just add flour on its own without anything else, it may not be as crispy, because the baking powder needs to be there to allow it to fry properly. And also, basin is quite tasteless. So when you start adding that without the spices and the salt, your pakoras aren't going to taste as nice, which is not, again, a fun place to be. If you want, you can always sort of give the batter a taste if you don't mind doing that. But yeah, raw batter is always fun when it's chocolate cake, but I'm not sure if it's pakora, maybe not so much. But if you follow the ratios I gave you guys, you'll be fine. You won't need to do a taste for the larger pot. You can see my bowl here really quickly. This is probably a decent consistency now in terms of the batter. I can add a little bit more water, but it's starting to, I'm conscious that there's still water coming out of the vegetables. I'm going to make it now, so it shouldn't be a problem. But any more than that, and you're going to be, your fritters are going to become like really, it'll spread in the oil and also become like little pakora bits instead of one big pakora fritter. Yeah, so this oil has been heating. So I'm going to go in. I have a slightly bigger than a tablespoon, like it's almost like a ladle tablespoon, because I want like a nice big fritter. My oil is hot, it's already steaming, so I've dropped the heat down. What typically happens is I get the oil to a certain temperature, then I drop it to medium heat and keep it going. I'm cooking it on one side for about 5 minutes. And you need to keep an eye on it. You don't want it to burn. It burns very easily. So the reason I get the heat up to a certain, oil up to a certain heat, is because I want it to be hot. And then after that, I kind of want to just maintain it at an even heat. So from time to time, I'll kick it back up to just reheat it and then kind of keep it at that low heat. But yes, so here we go with the first tablespoon's worth. Bear with me with the noise. actually not so bad with the noise. So that's the first one. And then I'm gonna do 3 at a time. And I may not do all of it today, just because there's gonna be quite a bit of batter. But what I did there, as you probably saw, is I did not put the spoon into the oil. I put it basically on top of the oil, and I just kept dropping the batter on top of itself, and it'll take its own shape in the oil. And that way I don't have to worry about fried batter on my spoon. I'll show that to you one more time. That's it going in here. Whoops. That's all that water. That's when you first drop it in. That's really, really strong. This guy is actually cooking really, really fast. I think this oil was pretty hot, so I'm just gonna flip them over. Oil was really hot. This guy's already done. The one that I put in first. So yeah, so it actually doesn't take long to make. I think when I was making it the other day, I was cautiously using a very low heat. So there you go, first one out. Drop the heat down. I'm gonna pull it back up, take this guy out and put another batch in. But that's basically it, guys. You can eat it immediately, depending on your tolerance for heat. I mean, you can ask my mom, but my sister will be at the wok pulling it out as it comes out, whereas I'll be all like waiting to have it in a civilized fashion with mint chutney and tea, because it is a tea time snack. Typically, in terms of when it's served, it's not a breakfast snack or anything like that. It's one that, you know, Indians love to have tea, and we'll come back, we'll sit down, and this will be the thing that we have with. So I am going to wait for that oil to heat back up slightly. I didn't realize that the heat actually went off altogether. So what I've got here is I'm just sort of sitting it on the side. I might actually put him in front here so you can see it. But I've just got him sitting to get the oil out, and then we'll be able to serve it up. Really simple, really quick. Yeah. I'm just going to go in with the next bit. All right, these guys are about done. So they sit on, just so you know, they sit on one side for a lot longer. And they take about, again, depending on the heat of your oil, about anywhere between 3 to 5 minutes. Like when I threw it in at the start, oil was very hot, it didn't take more than 3 minutes, and then I flipped it and we were done. Whereas this one, the heat's now a little bit more temperate. It took about 4 minutes on one side and then just less than 2 minutes on the other, and then you're done. These guys are huge too. I'm pretty impressed. The baking powder, I think did the trick in terms of really sort of making them sort of a little bit puffier, which just means it's going to be crunchy, which is not a bad thing. That's what you want in a pakora. So I've got a few, probably batter enough to do one more batch, and then we're just about done, actually. I wish I could serve this to you guys, because that's what we would do right now if you guys were here. Like, let's all sit down and chit chat and have some tea and have some pakora. All right, just getting that last bit out because we don't want him to get burnt. And off we go again with the last portion. Well, hopefully that was helpful for folks in terms of now knowing how to be able to make pakora.
Yep, I think I could do that.
Easy, right? Not terribly difficult. And I'm pretty sure you can get besan in Woolies, besan flour. So I should probably show you the packet. I'll just drop these guys in here. If you haven't seen it yet, I've seen it sold in Woolworth over here. Sorry, Nancy, Woolworth is, or for those that are not from Australia, Woolworth is just the local grocery store that most of us go to, or even Coles should have it. Looks like I have 4, maybe 5. Yeah, I might just leave that there. So let me just grab this. So this is what I used. So hopefully you can see that, besan. So channa just means, it's actually not chickpea. Channa dal is when you split chickpea, you get lentils in there. That's called channa dal, or it's called split chickpeas. It actually has another name that I can't think of. Mom, you're on mute. I think you have the answer. Go ahead.
Horse gram flour. Can you hear me?
Thank you. Yes, we can. Horse gram flour. That's it. It's also known as horse gram flour. Kala chana just means black chickpeas. So maybe I'll do a quick chickpea thing, but there's black chickpeas, which is horse gram chickpea. Then there's white chickpea, which is garbanzo beans or chickpeas that we know. And then there's chana dal, which is split chickpeas. And they all come from the same thing, and they're all used in so very many different ways. So this basically is when you take the little itty bitty thing on the inside and you blend it, you get this. So minus all the husks of the black chickpea and regular chickpea. I might grab the chickpea bottles and quickly show folks if that's going to be helpful. But yeah, I grew up loving black chickpea. Mom used to actually make it with prawns, oddly enough, which is how I liked it, which is not something you think of. You go, oh, you know, lentils, and that's a vegan or vegetarian dish. Persians actually make spinach stew with lamb and lentils. So, you know, coming from Northern Indian heritage, we tend to mix meat with lentils. So prawns and black chickpeas, so good. And I think kidney beans, right, Mom? Black chickpeas and kidney beans? Yes, yeah. The red kidney beans. But yes, I'll grab that in a sec. I just don't want to leave this unattended too, because he's ready to flip. Right, I've got the last batch going in. I'm going to make mini ones. I was going to quickly show you guys, well, I'm going to quickly finish with this. So this is the mint chutney that I mentioned. So let me just do two things. One, this is the color of Pakora, just straight up in terms of, hopefully you can see it, but it's golden. You know, I think one in here is maybe a little bit darker than that because it went in, then the oil was a little bit hot, but that's the color you're looking at. It's a golden color, you know, and it's a combination of the garam masala, the turmeric, and the basin being cooked at a certain temperature. And so as you cook it, you just want to make sure it doesn't go darker than that. As soon as it's starting to get close to that color, flip it. Or if you've got enough oil, pull it out because it's cooked all the way through. Everything's been cut really small or shredded, so it shouldn't take long to cook at all. It's more about making sure that the batter is cooked because, as you guys have all pointed out, for those who've tasted basin, it doesn't taste very good. So you just want to make sure it's cooked all the way and not soggy on the inside. So that's that. This is the mint chutney that I mentioned. So I've just got it sitting in a little bowl. Now, I've just, as I mentioned, have not used milk or anything like that, which is why it's darker. If you did put milk product or coconut yogurt or anything else like that, it would be a lighter mint chutney, but I prefer it this way. And we have it served with the pakoras. Just gonna grab a cooking tong. And there you go. I'm just gonna serve this up to my partner and myself for, I suppose, lunch, but yes. So you wait for the oil to drain out and then it's pretty much ready to go. And it's a great thing to have even when you are entertaining in terms of just a fun snack for everyone before you sit down for the main meal. So there you go, pakoras with mint chutney. So thanks again for watching, and I'll see you very soon.